No, I just want to say before the main speaker comes on, I just want to say he didn't really want us to celebrate his 40th because he doesn't want it to be all about him. That is the man, and I think that is the most wonderful quality that he's got, and it attracts me to politics that there's someone like that who is like that. Now. We've heard a lot about Jeremy Corbyn today, but he's here, and I'm really pleased that he's come. So can you make as much noise as you can, like it's 2017, for Jeremy Corbyn?
Thank you, and big thank you to Crispin and all those that have put this event together here on Highbury Fields. These fields, historic, saved from developers, made a park for the people, and it's been a scene of joy, of open air local events and all kinds of things, and it's brought our communities together. And I'm very, very proud to have been the Member of Parliament for Islington North since 1983. And if the people still wish me to continue, my services are available. Because I was first elected here in 1983, and I first came to London in the late 60s and early 1970s. Those days, it didn't feel like the greatest life on earth to be growing up and living in Britain. But by comparison to what young people face today, it was very different. We had completely free education right through to university level. We had completely free NHS. We had access to work and reasonable wages with great rapidity and speed. There was a sense of security and certainty for many young people. And you had these voices, these chattering voices in the background saying the idea of a welfare state, the idea of unemployment benefit, the idea of pensions, the idea of real social security saps the moral fibre of the nation. And what we need to do is get rid of all of that. Those siren voices that we were hearing in the popular press were the same mentality that was developing the whole idea of neoliberal economics throughout the 1970s. Reagan in California, Thatcher in Britain, Keith Joseph in Britain, and various others, and Milton Friedman in Chile, where they imposed the most brutal monetarist regime on the people already being occupied by the Chilean army, having killed the government of Salvador Allende and those brilliant people. So those voices are the people that did so much to try and destroy the hopes of generations. Those voices that brought Thatcher into power in 1979, brought on the onslaught onto the coal industry, brought on the privatization of mail, rail, brought on the privatization of gas and water and electricity, and brought in all the anti-trade union laws and the public order bills to prevent demonstrations and so on. And so when you're in the midst of some of these great struggles, it isn't always obvious what the great surges of history are. But there are crucial moments in battles when you've got to pick sides. When the government of Margaret Thatcher went after the miners in 1984, she did it on the back of the 1983 election victory. I was very proud to be elected for this constituency, and I've got the manifesto I put out at that time, and I've got the maiden speech that I made in Parliament that summer, and I stand by every single word of what I said at that time. She then came after the miners, and the strike took place. It was bitter, it was long. And our community around here, most people around here have never seen a coal mine. There are obviously no mines in the area, but that sense of solidarity with the mining communities was massive. We set up the Islington Support the Miners campaign. We raised, I estimate, around £100,000 for the miners. That was an awful lot of money in 1984-85, from check-off payments for council workers and others who were donating 25 pence a week and things like that to the miners. And the government went after the miners' union, sequestered all its funds, tried to close down its operation, and so we had to then set up almost a parallel system to support the miners' families, because the government also forced legislation through Parliament, during which we stopped parliamentary proceedings by occupying the mace to prevent it being used to put through. They were trying to put through legislation to prevent social security payments going to feed the children of miners' families. They were trying to starve them back to work. And that's why we set up this parallel system. And I've got a very vivid memory of getting the train from Finsbury Park, often do, down to King's Cross, carrying a co-op carrier bag. It was full, this co-op carrier bag, and it had some papers on top of it to disguise what was in it. I then went into the gentlemen's toilets at St Pancras Station, as you do, and I took this bag in with me into a cubicle, as you do, and I inadvertently mislaid it and left it there. The next person who went in picked up the bag and went out with it. That next person was Peter Heathfield, the General Secretary of the NUM, who took thousands of pounds in cash to Doncaster to feed the miners' families all over this country. You see, on the left we're inventive, we're imaginative. We think these ideas, we think of these things to do. And so it is about solidarity. But it's also about our local communities around here. The battle we had to build community centres, to get parks, to save services, to try and stop the government from destroying our local council by underfunding of it. The campaign that we mounted to defend the Whittington Hospital when we discovered that the accident and emergency department was due to close. How did we find that out? Because they weren't as smart as they thought they were. They mistakenly sent me an internal email to ask my views on closing of the A&E department. They thought I was Dr. Corbyn from the pathology department. And so that's how we found out about it. And we mounted a magnificent campaign. 5,000 people marched along the Holloway Road. And you know what? We won. The A&E department was saved, the Whittington Hospital was saved, and it's our hospital. And so when we campaign to defend services, that's the right and proper thing to do, of course it is. But I'm fed up with defending everything. I'm fed up with defending services. I don't want to fight just to defend the NHS. I'll fight till my dying day to the principle of healthcare free at the point of need as a human right. I will never leave that battle, never go away from it. But I also want a national care service, because if you think about it, all of us in this park at some point will need social care, or we will know a family member who needs social care, either from profound disability, from age, infirmity, all kinds of things. They might need social care. The service is inadequate. The people delivering the service are very badly paid. Access to it is very limited. And so we end up with many women giving up their lives, their jobs, their careers, their hopes in order to care for somebody, not because they don't love them, but because there's no alternative available. If we can afford a national health service, if we can afford nuclear weapons, if we can afford wars, we can afford a national care service. Yes. And we have to be bold and make these demands and make these arguments very, very clearly of the kind of world that we can live in, to raise people's hopes, which is why I feel very strongly about the way in which young people are treated in our society. In school, you have the sort of unfortunate counterposition of a deeply stressed teacher standing in a classroom in front of a class of deeply stressed children about to be tested, and the teacher about to be tested by the testers who don't test the children and test each other. So we have this whole relationship of stress in our education system. And because of the pressure of league tables and the pressure of measured achievement in schools, students get moved to different streams. Students get taken out of exam applications because they're not going to get a good grade. It might damage the state of the school within a league table. Somewhere along the line, we seem to have lost our way. Education, nursery education, preschool activities, play, interaction, social interaction between children, music, art, theatre, imagination, and all these things should be part and parcel and central to the child's experience in school and access to college. And it makes for a happier and better society, which is why I was very proud to put into our manifesto as a starting point, we would end university tuition fees. We would restore maintenance grants at university so that young people who've managed to get into university and study don't come out with a £50,000 or more debt hanging over them. So these things are so important. And that's why all the disputes and strikes we're having at the moment also bring in other things. I was talking to a group of junior doctors, ridiculous name for people that have spent 7 years getting qualifications, still be called a junior doctor, but never mind. They were telling me their concerns were about hospital management, their concerns were about pay, obviously, but their concerns were also about their own housing situation. Young doctors in hospitals in London sharing flats because they can't afford to rent a flat of their own because the rent levels are so high. And our borough council here in Islington does everything it can to build all the council housing it can. Well done, Islington. Full support for them in building council housing where they can. But every site we develop is a negotiation with a private sector developer to find out how many social rented properties we can get out of it. We have a housing crisis, we have a homelessness crisis, and we have a profit and greed crisis brought about by a government that basically empowers the developers and the speculators over local authorities and social housing provision. And so, over the years, we've fought many battles against stock transfer, and many battles to get council housing built, and I'm very pleased to see there is some new council housing becoming available. But the effects on people's lives of the housing they're in. I mean, I was doing a street advice bureau this morning. I do them quite regularly. I just go and stand on a street somewhere and see who walks by and what sort of issues they're faced with in their lives. If you're bringing up 4 children, one of whom may have disabilities, may have special needs, and you're living in a 1 or 2 bedroom flat. With the best will in the world, there's going to be stress in that family. With the best will in the world, those children are not going to be able to do the homework in the way that other children can, have got their own bedrooms, their own computer, and a bigger property and a garden to go with it. So we start discriminating against the poorest working class kids from birth onwards. We need housing as a right, not as a profit centre for those that can make money out of things. This is all what we can and ought to be able to achieve in our world, and that's why I was proud to lead the Labour Party and put forward the manifestos that we did in 2017 and 2019. But I tell you this, when you rattle the cage of the richest and most powerful in our land, they do not like it. They do not like it one bit. And I have to say a huge thank you to the people of this community my closest friends and comrades and allies, and particularly Laura, my wife, and my children, for the support that they have given during what has often been very difficult times when we've been under the cosh of abuse. But our job is not any stress that's placed on me. It's the stress of trying to bring up children in an overcrowded flat, the stress of being a triage nurse in a hospital when you haven't got enough beds to put people in, the stress of a mental health worker that can't find somewhere to put somebody when they're going through a very bad episode. Those are the stresses we create in our society because we're not prepared to spend the resources necessary to give people that decent life that they could and should have. And so our job is to do that. Our job is to unite people. Our job is to give people hope. And I'm full of hope of what can be achieved. And our borough represents people from all over the world. There are maybe 100 languages spoken within our borough. I don't know the exact figure, but there are a very large number. There are people from all over the world. And they teach us all so much. They teach us what they want to achieve and the contribution they want to make to our world. So when our media throw out abuse at people who are asylum seekers and refugees, I just say, what? Hold it for one moment. Just hold it. Those people that fled from the pogroms in Russia in the 19th century, Jewish people driven out of Russia in the 19th century, made their homes in the East End of London, made a fantastic contribution to our lives. Those that were driven out of Germany and Austria by the Nazis in the 1930s made their homes in this country and made a fantastic contribution to our lives. Those that are now being driven out of Afghanistan and other places because of poverty, of human rights abuse, because of torture, are looking for a place of safety in our world. Can we dial down the rhetoric that the government uses about marauding people trying to cross the channel to live in Britain? I went across to Calais and I talked to these apparently marauding navy that's there in Calais trying to invade this country. What do I find? Depressed, confused, poor, frightened people that had come from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Libya, from Syria, from Eritrea, from Ethiopia, from lots of places. And they were terrified, they were frightened, and they were prepared to risk all to get in a leaking boat to try and get here because they thought they would get a place of safety here. We have a government here that now wants to send them to Rwanda and walk away from the European Convention on Human Rights and all the human rights laws that protect the rights of all of us. Can we just recognize these are human beings trying to survive in a very dangerous world and hold out that hand of friendship to them? And so it's been my pleasure and pride to represent this community. Sometimes you say things people don't agree with and don't like. Sometimes you say things that people disagree with. I respect that. I understand that. But I also understand it's my duty as the Member of Parliament to speak up against injustice where you come across it. And so I'll give you an example. The first thing I did on being elected to Parliament in 1983 was to invite Sinn Féin to come to Parliament to have talks. I was condemned by the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Daily Telegraph, the News of the World, as it was in those days, and many other papers. Okay, fine, that's their agenda. There was never going to be any peace without dialogue. There was never going to be any progress without dialogue. Ken Livingstone and others promoted that dialogue. That dialogue eventually led to the Belfast Agreement. And so you have to do that. The way in which this borough came together to support the African National Congress, many of whose leaders lived in this area. Oliver Tambo lived just down the road. Many others lived here. David Kitson just lived over the road there in Riversdale Road. All those people that were victims of apartheid, been in prison for apartheid, ended up here and then went back to South Africa. They weren't lauded at the time, but the bravery of the people in South Africa did end the apartheid system, did get Mandela out of prison, did change the whole history of the world by that action. And so when somebody is saying something that doesn't seem to appeal to our popular press and our editors, think again. Think you've got to speak out and do stuff. Gay rights campaigners met down here, just by the tube station, got arrested, got abused. Eventually legislation was passed. Things do change. So when we fight back against racism in any form whatsoever in our world, fight back against discrimination of any form, we embolden those people that are fighting back in other places. Our community is a wonderful community. We have a wonderful past, we have an even better future, provided we stick with each other, support each other, have confidence and hope that we can create that better and more peaceful world for the future. As Lindsay pointed out, I was one of only 17 that voted against the war in Afghanistan in 2001. I was in a minority in voting against the war in Iraq. But it's amazing the funny memories that some of my colleagues in Parliament have, because I listen to their speeches and I add up what they say and add up the votes at the time, and there's a big difference. Can't explain it, but what I do know is that you've got to think through an issue and decide, is the future to be war, discrimination, destruction and ruination of our world? Or is our world to be one of peace and justice and equality? You achieve the latter by challenging the citizens of power that have created the former. So, to everyone here, thank you so much for coming. Crispin, thank you for coming. Thank you so much for the music. Thank you for the solidarity. Together, together, together we are very, very strong. Thank you, my friends.
Jeremy Corbyn!